I'm Irene, sitting in my corner office, looking out at the snow-dusted city skyline. I'm reminded of that fateful family dinner. It was a night that changed everything, a night when I finally found my voice and shattered the illusion of my invisibility. The dinner had been a performance, as always. My sister Lily's new boyfriend, Ethan, a seemingly polished private equity guy, was holding court. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my annual vacation, and his Rolex glinted under the soft candlelight. My parents, Harold and Margaret, hung on his every word, their eyes shining with approval. I was sitting at the table, pushing the food around on my plate, feeling like an outsider in my own family. Lily, the golden child, was beaming beside Ethan, her laughter a bit too loud, her hand possessively on his arm. My husband, Ryan, a high school math teacher, sat next to me, his shoulders hunched, his voice soft when he spoke. Ethan started making fun of my clothes, my job, and even my accent. "Your style is so classic," he said, with a condescending smile. "And your job in HR. It must be so routine." Everyone at the table laughed, and Ryan squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "Please don't make a scene." I'd spent years being the quiet one, the practical daughter who never caused a stir. I'd built my own HR tech startup, TalentLink, from the ground up, but my family had no idea. To them, I was just the girl who filed paperwork and planned office parties. But then, Ethan started bragging about his latest acquisition. "We're in the middle of taking over this mid-tier HR tech company. Can't remember the exact name, but it's a real diamond in the rough," he said, swirling his wine. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I knew exactly what he was talking about. He was talking about TalentLink, the company I'd slaved over for the past 5 years. I'd worked 16-hour days, pitched to countless investors, and almost gone bankrupt twice. And here he was, using my hard-won success to impress my family. I felt a cold rage building inside me. I'd kept quiet for too long. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and opened the folder filled with all the documents from our acquisition talks with Blackstone Capital, the firm that was actually in negotiations with TalentLink. "Ethan," I said, my voice cutting through his monologue. "What firm did you say you work for?" He looked at me, surprised, then straightened up, thinking I was finally engaging with his brilliance. "Blackstone Capital," he replied. "And you're leading the TalentLink acquisition?" I asked. "Absolutely," he said, with a confident smile. I smiled back, not the polite smile I'd worn for years, but a real smile, full of determination. "That's interesting," I said, "because I'm the founder and CEO of TalentLink. And according to these documents, which I have because I've been in active negotiations with Blackstone for 6 months, you're not on the acquisition team." I turned my phone screen towards him, showing him the official team roster. Ethan's face went pale. "There must be some mistake," he stammered. I scrolled through the documents, showing him the company directory and the public SEC filings that revealed he'd been fired from Blackstone 6 months ago for ethics violations. "You were let go for falsifying client reports and misrepresenting deal involvement to secure personal bonuses," I read aloud. The room went dead silent. My mother's wineglass trembled in her hand, my father's mouth hung open, and Lily stared at Ethan in shock. Ryan looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Ethan tried to defend himself, but his words were weak. "This is all out of context," he said. I looked at him, my voice calm. "What context makes fraud acceptable?" Lily finally found her voice. "You told me you were promoted. You showed me an email," she said, her voice shaking. Ethan reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Where were you actually going? You said you were leading deals," she demanded. He couldn't answer. I leaned forward. "Explain what, Ethan? That you've been using my company, my hard work, to impress my family while mocking me all night." My mother, who had always been so composed, finally lost it. "Get out of my house," she said, her voice cold and final. Ethan looked around the table desperately, but there were no allies. He stumbled towards the door, and with a loud slam, he was gone. In the silence that followed, my mother turned to me. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her directly. You never asked, I replied. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. My family had always judged me by their narrow standards of success, never bothering to look beyond the surface. They'd celebrated Lily's every achievement, while my real accomplishments had gone unnoticed. But how did I end up at that dinner table, being the invisible one in my own family? I grew up in a family where success was measured by wealth and status. My father, Harold, was a high-powered investment banker who had always been more interested in numbers and deals than in his daughters. My mother, Margaret, was a socialite who loved to show off her family's achievements at charity events. Lily was the perfect daughter. She was beautiful, charming, and had a knack for getting what she wanted. She worked in luxury brand management, and her clients were some of the most famous names in the industry. My parents were always so proud of her, and they never missed an opportunity to show her off. I, on the other hand, was the practical one. I'd chosen a career in HR because it seemed stable. But 5 years ago, I'd had an idea for a tech platform that could revolutionize the way companies manage talent. I'd taken a leap of faith, quit my corporate job, and poured all my savings into TalentLink. I'd worked day and night, teaching myself coding, pitching to investors, and handling customer support. It was a struggle, but TalentLink started to gain traction. Last year, we hit 8 figures in revenue, and we were in talks with several major investment firms. But I'd kept it all a secret from my family. I'd seen how they treated Ryan, my husband. His kind heart and love for his students meant nothing to them. They saw his teacher's salary as a sign of failure. So, I'd hidden my success, afraid that they would dismiss it just like they dismissed everything else about me. Lily had a new boyfriend every few months, and each one was more impressive than the last. My parents treated her relationships like business deals, always looking for the one who could enhance their social status. Ryan, on the other hand, was treated like a consolation prize. At least she settled, my mother had said once, as if marrying a teacher was the equivalent of giving up on life. That Sunday afternoon, Lily called to tell me about Ethan. He's amazing, Irene. He's in private equity, and he went to Harvard, she gushed. I could hear the excitement in my mother's voice in the background. That sounds great, I said, folding laundry in my small apartment. I was used to Lily's new boyfriends, all of them with their expensive suits and inflated egos. Lily continued, Mom's planning the whole dinner. She wants it to be perfect. You're coming, right? It wasn't really a question. In our family, skipping Sunday dinner was not an option. When I told Ryan about the dinner, he sighed. He was grading papers at the kitchen table, looking tired. Maybe this one will be different, he said. I didn't have the heart to tell him that different didn't matter to my parents. What they wanted was impressive, successful, and wealthy. That evening, I stood in front of my closet, looking at the same black dress I'd worn to the last few family dinners. It was simple, unassuming, just like me. I caught my reflection in the mirror and wondered when I'd become so small. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Dinner at 7 o'clock sharp. Don't be late. And Irene, please make an effort with your appearance. First impressions matter. I'd been having Sunday dinners with my parents for years, and yet I still hadn't made a good first impression. Sunday arrived, and Ryan drove us to my parents' mansion in silence. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree, with candles flickering in every window. Classical music drifted out, and the front door wreath looked like it had been designed by a professional. My mother opened the door, wearing a designer dress and pearls. Her smile was bright but fake. Darling, she said, kissing my cheek. Her eyes scanned my dress, and I saw her smile tighten slightly. How lovely, she said, her tone insincere. Ryan, wonderful to see you, she added, ushering us inside. The dining room table was set with military precision, with crystal glasses and silverware shining in the candlelight. The napkins were folded into intricate shapes, and a centerpiece of fresh flowers added a touch of elegance. Lily and Ethan are in the living room, my mother said, leading us there. Lily was sitting on the couch, looking like a movie star in a designer gown. Her makeup was flawless, and her hair was styled in loose waves. Beside her sat Ethan, tall and handsome, with a confident smile. Lily introduced us. Irene, this is Ethan. Ethan, this is my older sister and her husband, Ryan. Ethan extended his hand, his smile perfect. Pleasure to meet you both, he said. His handshake was firm, practiced. I shook his hand, feeling his eyes sizing me up. Nice to meet you, I said. Ryan shook hands with him, and I saw Ethan's eyes flick to Ryan's simple watch. So, you're a teacher, right? He asked, with a hint of condescension. That's a noble profession. My father appeared from the kitchen, holding a glass of scotch. Harold, he said, extending his hand to Ethan. Heard great things. Private equity, Lily tells us. And just like that, Ethan had the floor. He started talking about strategic diversification and predictive analytics, and my parents hung on his every word. Lily beamed beside him, acting the part of the adoring girlfriend. I pushed my food around my plate, feeling Ryan's knee press against mine under the table. As the dinner went on, Ethan's condescension grew. He commented on my dress, saying it was timeless, which was his way of saying it was outdated. He also suggested that Ryan look into educational consulting, implying that his teaching job was a waste of his potential. Ryan forced a smile and said he'd consider it, but I knew he loved teaching. Then he turned to me. So, Irene, you work in HR, right? That must be interesting, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The HR side is so administrative, you know. It's not where the real action is. I felt Ryan tense beside me. Someone has to make sure the strategists don't end up in legal trouble, I said, trying to keep my voice even. The table laughed nervously, and Ethan smiled wider.
Touché.
But seriously, have you ever thought about pivoting? You seem smart. Maybe you could get into something more exciting. Before I could respond, my mother jumped in. Irene has always preferred stability, she said, her voice dismissive. She's very practical that way. The word practical felt like a punch in the gut. It was the word that had defined my life in this family. Ethan wasn't done. Well, practical is okay, but real success requires taking risks. That's how you build wealth, he said, gesturing at the expensive dining room. My father nodded in agreement. Ethan then turned to Ryan. Teaching is a noble profession, but you could make so much more in consulting, he said. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His knee pressed harder against mine. Then came the comment that broke me. I love your accent, Irene. It's so charming, like a throwback. Where are you from originally? He asked. Small town in Ohio, I said quietly. That makes sense, he said, nodding like he'd solved a puzzle. It's so authentic. The table laughed, and Ryan squeezed my hand, whispering, Please don't make a scene. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. For years, I'd followed that advice, but in that moment, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. After Ethan was kicked out, the atmosphere at the table was tense. My mother sat there, her hands folded on the table, looking like she'd aged 10 years. My father stared into his scotch glass, lost in thought. Lily had run upstairs, and we could hear her sobbing through the ceiling. Ryan sat beside me, his hand still holding mine, but his expression was a mix of shock and guilt. My mother finally spoke. I need to understand, she said, her voice shaky. You own a company? Worth how much? I met her gaze steadily. We hit 8 figures in revenue last year. We're in acquisition talks with Blackstone and 2 other major firms. The projected valuation is between $40 million and $60 million, depending on the offer we accept. My father's head snapped up. You built a $60 million company? He repeated, his voice hoarse. I nodded. Built and currently run. I have 50 employees across 4 offices, and we serve over 250 corporate clients. We expanded into the Asian market last quarter. My mother sank back into her chair, looking stunned. And we never knew, she whispered. No, I said. You never knew. Ryan's hand tightened on mine. I turned to look at him. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide. You own an 8-figure company, and you never told me, he said. I looked at him, really looked at the man I'd married. Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. If I told you a year ago, or even 6 months ago, would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was exaggerating? He flinched, And I knew I had my answer. "I'm tired, Ryan," I said. "I'm tired of being the disappointing daughter, the boring sister, the wife who has to be quiet." Ryan's expression shifted. "I should have defended you," he said, his voice rough. "Every Sunday, every time they dismissed you. I was scared of them, of their judgment. I'm sorry." I looked at him, seeing the remorse in his eyes. "Yes, you should have," I said. Before we could say more, my mother appeared at the end of the hallway. Her perfect posture was gone, and she looked smaller somehow. "Stay," she said, her voice a plea. "Please. We need to talk." Ryan and I looked at each other, then nodded. "Let's talk," I said. We moved to the living room. My mother sat on the edge of her chair, looking lost. My father joined us, carrying his scotch. He looked old and tired. Lily came downstairs, her eyes red and swollen. She curled up on the couch, looking like a lost child. For a long time, no one spoke. Then my father cleared his throat. "I've been a fool," he said. "We've measured you by the wrong standards. We've made you feel invisible in your own family." My mother nodded, tears in her eyes. "I thought I was teaching you girls to be strong, to be ambitious. But I was just teaching you to perform. I stopped seeing you as people." Lily looked up. "I've been performing for you my whole life." "I'm so tired," she said. I looked at her. "We've both been trapped in this script. But it doesn't have to be this way." Over the next few weeks, things started to change. Lily applied for a real job in marketing at a local company. She stopped dating guys to impress our parents and started focusing on what she really wanted. My parents started to make an effort to get to know me. They asked real questions about TalentLink, and they listened to my answers with genuine interest. Ryan and I started couples therapy. We talked about our unspoken resentments and our hopes for the future. He started to see me for who I really was, not the version of me he'd married. 3 months later, the acquisition of TalentLink was finalized. I negotiated to stay on as CEO, and we were set to expand even further. One cold January morning, as I sat in my newly renovated office, looking out at the city, I thought about how far I'd come. I'd finally found my voice, and I'd freed my family from the prison of perfection. The viral story about that dinner had faded from the internet, but it had left a lasting impact. I'd received speaking invitations and mentorship requests, and I'd even been approached by a business magazine for a profile. I'd hesitated at first, but then I remembered that dinner, that moment when I'd finally stopped shrinking. I said yes, not for the fame, but because I wanted to show others that it was possible to break free from the shadows. My sister Lily came in for lunch one day. She'd cut her hair, and she was wearing business, casual clothes. She looked more real, more herself. "Hey," she said, giving me a hug. "Sorry I'm late. The bus was a nightmare." I raised an eyebrow. "You took the bus?" She laughed. "I'm on a budget now. Real job, real life. It's actually kind of liberating." We sat down to eat, and she told me about her new job. She was excited, and I could see the passion in her eyes. As we talked, I realized that our family was finally starting to heal. We were all learning to be real, to accept each other for who we were. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly at peace.